So my background is fundamental acoustics. So my PhD work was actually sonic booms, so looking at supersonic aircraft and looking at how shock waves propagate from the aircraft down through the atmosphere and to the ground. After I finished that, I started working with a project where we looked at shock waves used to break up kidney stones. In that case, shock waves were generated outside the body. They passed through the body, interacted with, and broke up a kidney stone. They sound different in some regards, but actually the physics that underlies them is identical. The same equations that describe how a sonic boom travels through the atmosphere are used to describe how a shock wave travels through the body. And so I can take those fundamental bits of acoustics and the physics and engineering and be able to apply those to this sort of problem. We've published some papers on that showing that there are certain ways in which you should fire the shock waves in order to break those kidney stones up better. And maybe one of the nicest things that happened to me was just sitting in my office one day and the phone went off, and it was a urologist who was working in the US who had read one of my papers, had changed the way that he treated patients, and was calling me to say, I can now break up kidney stones better than I could a year ago because I was able to read your work. And that was very nice to be able to have that impact where you've been able to have people's kidney stones being treated better because of some fundamental advance that you've made. Using shockwaves to break up kidney stones is probably the first major application of using ultrasound as a therapeutic mechanism. It's been used now for 3 decades to be able to break up kidney stones. It revolutionized the treatment of kidney stones. Before that, you had to have open surgery. Once this technology came in, within about 5 years, at least in the US and in the UK, 90% of kidney stones were being treated with shockwaves. Now, what we are envisioning as we take ultrasound on to look at other applications, so for example cancer, treating in oncology, we're hoping to be able to make the same sort of difference. The issues in getting ultrasound to treat cancer turn out to be a lot more complicated than using a shockwave to break up a kidney stone, so we still have some barriers to overcome there. But in the same way that you can compete against technology that is normally invasive, normally has some serious side effects. Ultrasound is non-invasive, so there's no incision made inside the body. It's non-ionizing radiation, so there's no radiation sickness that's going to be associated with it. And so we should be able to, if we can overcome some of these engineering barriers, be able to make a huge advance in oncology in the same way that shockwaves were able to in lithotripsy. Ultrasound has the ability, probably within actually the next decade, to start making serious inroads in at least 2 areas of cancer treatment. So one is the direct ablation, so using ultrasound to heat up and destroy tissue. So there'll be a direct competition with surgery or with radiotherapy. The other thing that ultrasound has the ability to do is to help with chemotherapy. So one of the major issues with chemotherapy is you give drugs that are essentially poisons. They poison the cancer, but they also poison the other cells within your body. And what we can do is we can encapsulate those chemo drugs in little agents that are sensitive to ultrasound. So you inject them in the body, they're encapsulated in this nice, safe little membrane. And then if we fire ultrasound in, we can actually tune the ultrasound to pop that membrane and deliver the drugs to just the right place. So for example, if there's a tumor in the liver, we focus the ultrasound into the liver. The drugs are only released in the liver. You have a high concentration of the chemotherapy in the liver. As those chemotherapy drugs pass out of the liver, they will get diluted down by blood elsewhere, and so the rest of the body will not see such high concentrations, and so the side effects should be reduced. So there are multiple barriers as to why ultrasound can't be used. People, particularly the surgeons, a lot of them already have a preferred way in which they'd like to treat cancer. They're not interested in developing new techniques. Already they have so much experience in current techniques that it makes them hard for them to start considering new ideas. I've had a number of surgeons at least tell me one of their issues with things like ultrasound is they like to be able to actually physically remove the cancer themselves. Cancer belongs in a bucket is one of the terms that I've heard a number of times, and rather than using ultrasound to go in and heat and destroy stuff, they would rather open up and actually physically remove and know which bit of tissue that they've removed from the body. I think clinical trials, whether you're a pharmaceutical or whether you're a device company, are challenging no matter what. And so there are huge regulatory barriers in trying to get a clinical trial through. Although I think the issue is mostly the costs that are involved. To be able to run a clinical trial that has enough people in it and where you can get a result that you can actually trust, you normally need large numbers of people. And for things like oncology, you typically have to follow up over many years, so the cost associated with that is enormous. And so to be able to fund that, you need to have a funding body or a company who have deep pockets to be able to cover that, because we still are looking at a blue sky technology. So you cannot be guaranteed that you're going to get a return on the money that's going to go back, to come back to you from that clinical trial. And so I think more than the regulatory barriers, I think the costs are probably one of the key barriers in being able to move forward. Whenever you use technology, you've got to get it right no matter what you're doing. I work in what is biomedical engineering, and my goal actually is to try and bring some of the rigor of engineering into biology rather than what I would consider the woolliness of biology into engineering. And so in engineering, we're very precise. To us, numbers are important, being able to quantify things. Even if we don't understand things properly, being able to understand how well we don't understand things is just as important, so that we can make a system that's robust. So if we want to fire ultrasound into the body, every body is different. They have different layers of fat, different layers of muscle, and even within their own fat, the acoustic properties within their own fat will vary. And so if we design a system that has to focus through fat and muscle, it needs to work for everybody who turns up for us. And so we need to be able to make sure our system is what we refer to as robust. If somebody comes in one day and their fat is a little thinner, or it's a little thicker, has slightly different properties, we need to be able to make sure that we can focus and direct the sound waves through. And the only way you can do that is actually by understanding the physics that underlies that propagation. And so by being able to understand that physics, we can consider lots of different scenarios, we can consider lots of different patients, different types of material properties, and we can make sure that when we fire the ultrasound into the liver, into the kidney, we know it's going to go into the right place.